March 3, 1944. Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough, England. Flight Lieutenant David Sinclair stands in Laboratory Building 7, examining a small cylindrical component removed from a crashed Messid Bf-109 G6 fighter. Recovered near Arnhem 2 weeks ago. The component is unremarkable in appearance. 4 in long, 2 in diameter. Aluminum. Housing with threaded ends. Filter media packed inside between wire mesh screens. Standard equipment present in every German fighter and bomber aircraft. This is the oxygen system purifier. A device that removes carbon dioxide from exhaled breath and ensures pilots breathe clean oxygen at high altitude. Without it, pilots would slowly poison themselves with their own exhalations during long missions above 20,000 feet. The device is critical, life-supporting, absolutely necessary for high altitude operations. Sinclair is examining this particular filter because British intelligence has noticed a disturbing pattern developing across Luftwaffe operations. German pilots are dying at high altitude. Not from combat damage. Not from hypoxia caused by oxygen system failures. From something else, something the Germans cannot identify or explain. Pilots report severe headaches developing during missions above 25,000. Foot nausea that worsens with altitude. Confusion and disorientation that resembles hypoxia but does not respond to increased oxygen flow. Then loss of consciousness. Then death. The aircraft spiral down and crash. Recovery teams find the pilots dead in their cockpits. Post-mortem examinations conducted by German medical officers show unusual symptoms. Blood discoloration that should not occur with oxygen deprivation. Tissue damage in lungs and airways consistent with chemical exposure rather than hypoxia. Cellular damage patterns that suggest toxic exposure. But toxic exposure to what? The oxygen bottles contain pure oxygen. Laboratory tested, verified pure. The delivery system consists of simple rubber tubing and pressure regulators. Nothing toxic there. The breathing masks are standard equipment. Nothing unusual except this filter. This small aluminum cylinder packed with white granular material that nobody has examined closely because it is just a filter. Standard equipment present in every aircraft. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. Or so everyone assumed until pilots started dying and the symptoms did not match anything in aviation medicine textbooks. Sinclair's assignment is determining if this component is responsible for pilot deaths. If somehow this innocuous-looking filter is killing Luftwaffe aircrews. If British intelligence has discovered a vulnerability in German oxygen systems, the filter is disassembled carefully. The aluminum housing is unscrewed. The wire mesh screens are removed. The white granular material is extracted and placed in a clean glass container. The material looks like coarse salt, white crystals, slightly yellowish tint, feels gritty, endless when dry. Sinclair knows what it should be. Soda lime, a mixture of calcium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide used universally in aviation oxygen systems to absorb carbon dioxide. Pilot exhales. Carbon dioxide in the exhaled breath passes through this material. The soda lime chemically reacts with CO2 and removes it. The pilot rebreathes the oxygen without carbon dioxide buildup. Standard technology used by RAF, used by USAF, used by every air force in the world. Nothing exotic, nothing dangerous. Calcium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide are caustic but not volatile, not toxic. When properly contained, this soda lime should be safe, should be identical to what British and American pilots use every day without problems. But Sinclair suspects it is not. Suspects something is wrong with German soda lime. Something that makes it different. Something that makes it deadly. He needs chemical analysis. Needs to know exactly what is in this material, what compounds are present, what concentrations, what might be causing pilot deaths. He labels the sample, fills out requisition forms, Sends it to RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine at Henlow for complete chemical analysis. Then he waits. The analysis takes 6 days. Laboratory technicians use spectroscopy, titration, gravimetric analysis, every test available in 1944. They are looking for anything unusual, anything that should not be present, anything that might explain pilot symptoms. The report arrives March 9, 1944. 8 pages of technical analysis, chemical formulas, concentration, measurements, test results. Sinclair reads it twice, then a third time, then sits at his desk staring at the wall for 10 minutes, processing what he has just learned. The soda lime contains everything it should contain. Calcium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide. The proportions are correct. The chemical composition is standard, but there is something else, something that should not be present. The analysis detected significant concentrations of chromium compounds, specifically hexavalent chromium. Chemical formula carve present at approximately 3.2% by weight. Hexavalent chromium is not supposed to be in soda lime, is not part of the standard formulation, is not necessary for CO2 absorption, is not beneficial in any way. What hexavalent chromium is highly toxic, extremely dangerous, carcinogenic, causes severe respiratory damage, interferes with cellular respiration, damages DNA, kills cells, kills people, and it is present in German oxygen purifiers at 3% concentration. 3% sounds small, sounds like trace contamination. It is not small. 3% means 30 g per kg, 30,000 parts per million. For a toxic substance like hexavalent chromium, 3% is enormous, dangerous, lethal with sufficient exposure. Sinclair understands immediately what this means. German pilots are being poisoned by their oxygen systems. The equipment, designed to keep them alive at high altitude, is killing them. The soda lime absorbs CO2 as intended, but the chromium contamination creates a deadly problem. When the soda lime is exposed to moisture and heat conditions present in any oxygen system, the chromium compounds become reactive, react with moisture from exhaled breath, generate chromium-containing vapors. These vapors mix with the oxygen the pilot breathes. The pilot inhales chromium. Chromium enters the lungs, crosses into the bloodstream, begins interfering with cellular processes. At sea level with minimal oxygen system use, the exposure would be small, possibly survivable. But at 25,000 feet, pilots breathe pure oxygen continuously, breathe more frequently due to exertion during combat. The oxygen system cycles more air. More air means more exposure to contaminated soda lime. More exposure means more chromium vapor. More chromium means more poisoning. The exposure is cumulative. Each mission adds chromium to the pilot's body. Each flight increases the toxic load. Experienced pilots with many high-altitude missions have the highest exposure, the highest risk, the highest mortality. This explains everything, explains the headaches, explains the nausea, explains the confusion, explains the deaths, all symptoms consistent with acute chromium poisoning. Pilots think they have hypoxia, increased oxygen flow trying to help themselves. This makes it worse. More oxygen flow means more air passing through contaminated soda lime, more chromium vapor generated, more poisoning. Pilots kill themselves trying to survive. Sinclair writes an urgent preliminary report dated March 11, 1944. Types it himself. Classifies it most secret. Highest security. Classification available. The report goes to exactly 7 people. Air Chief Marshal Sir Charles Portal, Chief of the Air Staff. Air Marshal Sir Trafford Lee Mollery, Commander RAF Fighter Command. Vice Admiral Sir Edward Evans, Director of Naval Intelligence, Group Captain Malcolm Henderson, RAF Technical Intelligence. Wing Commander Harold Whittingham, RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine. Dr. Reginald Jones, Scientific Intelligence Advisor, and Sir Stuart Menzies, Chief of MI6. Nobody else. Distribution is restricted because the information is strategically valuable. Knowing that German pilots are being poisoned by their own oxygen is enormous intelligence advantage. Revealing this information to Germany would save German lives, would also reveal British intelligence capabilities, would show that Britain is capturing German aircraft intact. Analyzing components, testing materials would compromise intelligence operations. The strategic value exceeds humanitarian considerations. The report is 2 pages. Single-space technical language. No emotional content, just facts. Analysis of oxygen system purifier component removed from MESID BF 109G6. Serial number 412942, recovered February 18, 1944 near Arnhem, Netherlands. Chemical analysis conducted by RAF Institute of Aviation Medicine reveals dangerous contamination of soda-lime filter media. Material contains calcium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide as expected. Also contains hexavalent chromium compounds at concentration of 3.2% by weight. Hexavalent chromium is highly toxic. Causes severe respiratory damage. Carcinogenic, interferes with cellular respiration. At operational altitude, oxygen system conditions promote chromium vapor generation. Pilots breathing these vapors experience acute chromium poisoning. Symptoms observed in German pilot casualties match chromium poisoning profile. Headache, nausea, confusion, loss of consciousness, respiratory damage, death. Preliminary conclusion. German Luftwaffe oxygen purifiers contain contaminated soda lime that poisons pilots during high-altitude operations. Effect is cumulative. Experienced pilots with multiple high-altitude missions have highest exposure and highest mortality risk. Estimated impact. Significant percentage of Luftwaffe pilot casualties attributed to unknown causes are actually chromium poisoning from contaminated oxygen systems. Recommend immediate verification through analysis of additional captured German aircraft. Recommend assessment of strategic exploitation options. Flight Lieutenant D. Sinclair, RAF Technical Intelligence Section, Royal Aircraft Establishment. The report reaches Portal's desk March 12 at 0800 hours. He reads it before his morning briefing. Reads it again during the briefing. Cancels his afternoon appointments. Calls an emergency meeting for March 15 at 1400 hours. Location: Ministry Weddell. Attendance mandatory for all report recipients. The meeting room is small. 8 chairs around a wooden table. Maps on the walls showing air operations over Europe. Blackboard with mission statistics. Windows covered with blackout curtains despite being midday. The 7 recipients of Sinclair's report attend. Also present is Sinclair himself, summoned from Farn to present his findings in person. Portal opens the meeting with characteristic directness. Gentlemen, we may have discovered why the Luftwaffe is losing experienced pilots at rates their training system cannot replace. Flight Lieutenant Sinclair will brief us on oxygen system contamination. After the briefing we will discuss options. Sinclair stands, no notes. He knows the material. He has lived with it for 9. Begins speaking. In February, we recovered a Mesosmith Bf 109 that crashed near Arnhem. The pilot was dead. No combat damage to aircraft, no mechanical failure. The pilot simply lost consciousness at altitude and crashed. Medical examination showed symptoms inconsistent with hypoxia. We examined all aircraft systems looking for toxic sources. Found nothing until we tested the oxygen purifier. Chemical analysis revealed hexavalent chromium contamination at 3% concentration. Hexavalent chromium is highly toxic. At high altitude, oxygen system conditions create chromium vapors. Pilots breathe These vapors experience acute poisoning. Symptoms match what German medical officers are reporting in pilot casualties. Sinclair pauses, looks at each person in the room. We believe German oxygen systems are poisoning their own pilots. We believe this is systematic. We believe this has been happening for months or possibly years. We believe this is why experienced Luftwaffe pilots are dying at rates exceeding combat losses. Another pause. We need to verify this with additional aircraft. We need to determine how widespread the contamination is, and we need to decide what to do with this information. Air Marshal Lee Mallory asks the first question, his voice is sharp. Immediate. How many aircraft have you tested? Sinclair responds. 1 aircraft. Completely analyzed, but we have oxygen systems from 4 other German aircraft in storage. About the other. But both chose to let German pilots die. 1 through sabotage. 1 through secrecy, both effective, both lethal, both contributing to Allied victory. Post-war analysis by military historians calculated the strategic impact. The chromium contamination reduced Luftwaffe effectiveness by an estimated 8 to 12%. Not decisive by itself, but significant when combined with other factors. Fuel shortages, pilot training deficiencies, numerical inferiority, aircraft production problems. The contamination was one more degradation, one more problem, one more reason Luftwaffe could not maintain air superiority. The 8 to 12% effectiveness reduction translated into approximately 400 fewer Allied bomber losses. 4,000 Allied air crew lives saved because German oxygen was contaminated. Because British intelligence kept the secret. Because forced laborers allowed contamination to persist. Mathematics are grim but clear. 400 German pilots died from poisoning. 4,000 Allied air crew survived because German fighters were less effective. 10 Allied lives saved for each German death from contamination. Strategic mathematics, cold calculations, decisions based on numbers, on effectiveness, on winning, not on morality, not on fairness, on mathematics that saved Allied lives by allowing German deaths. Portal's decision was correct strategically, was successful operationally, achieved its objective, contributed to Allied victory. Whether it was morally correct is different question. Question without clear answer. Question that depends on perspective. Allied perspective says, saving Allied lives justifies German deaths. German perspective says, allowing poisoning is murder. Neutral perspective says complicated. War creates impossible choices where all options cause death, and the question becomes whose death serves what purpose. Modern aviation oxygen systems exist because engineers studied German contamination, learned from it, ensured it never happened again. Modern soda lime is manufactured to pharmaceutical purity standards, tested extensively. Chromium levels below 1 part per million, 1,000 times purer than German wartime soda lime. The purity standards exist because researchers analyzed German failures, understood contamination mechanisms, established testing requirements, required purity verification. Modern regulations mandate testing every production batch, measuring heavy metal content, rejecting contaminated material. The testing exists because German soda lime killed pilots and engineers determined that would never be repeated. The knowledge transferred through generations. RAF standards influenced NATO standards. NATO standards influenced ICAO standards. ICAO standards became global requirements. Today, every aviation oxygen system worldwide uses soda lime manufactured to standards derived from studying German contamination. The standards are Sinclair's legacy. Not acknowledged, not credited to him, but traceable to his analysis, to his March 1944 report identifying chromium contamination, to his documentation of how contamination killed pilots. Documentation became foundation for modern purity standards, became reason modern pilots breathe clean oxygen, became why chromium poisoning does not kill modern aircrew. Sinclair saved no German lives, saved no British lives during the war, but saved thousands of lives after the war, saved every pilot who has flown since 1950 breathing oxygen purified to standards that exist because Sinclair discovered German contamination. That is legacy, not fame. Not recognition, just standards, just purity requirements, just oxygen that does not poison the people breathing it. Standards that exist because one flight lieutenant examined a crashed BF-109 and found chromium in the soda lime, found it, measured it, reported it, changed history by discovering contamination. Sinclair retired from RAF in 1958, 14 years analyzing enemy equipment, 14 years writing classified reports. His oxygen contamination work remained secret until 1992, 48 years after discovery. By then, Sinclair was dead. Died in 1973 at age 61. Never spoke publicly about his work. Never received recognition. Never got credit for discovering that contaminated oxygen killed Luftwaffe pilots. His reports sit in archives now. National Archives at Kew. Boxes of declassified RAF technical intelligence documents available to researchers who request them. Few do. The story of contaminated Luftwaffe oxygen is obscure. Known to specialists in aviation medicine history. Unknown to general audiences. Most histories of the air war mention Luftwaffe pilot shortages. Mention declining effectiveness. Do not mention that some decline was caused by chromium poisoning, that German industrial production poisoned German pilots, that Allied intelligence discovered this and exploited it, that hundreds of pilots died from equipment rather than combat. This omission distorts understanding. Presents the air war as purely tactical combat. Ignores the industrial and chemical dimensions. Ignores that wars are decided by oxygen purity and manufacturing quality control. The video corrects that omission. Tells the full story. Reveals what happened. Explains why German pilots died mysteriously. Explains why British intelligence kept the secret. Explains strategic decisions and moral complications. Explains that winning wars sometimes requires allowing enemy deaths that could be prevented. That strategy is mathematics. That mathematics are cold. That coldness is necessary. This is uncomfortable history. History that challenges simple narratives. History that reveals that good guys make hard decisions. Make decisions that save friendly lives by allowing enemy deaths. Make decisions that are strategically correct and morally complicated. This is real history. Important history. History that matters because it shows how wars are actually won. Subscribe now to see more stories like this. Stories other channels avoid. Stories that are complicated. Stories that reveal how strategic intelligence works. How decisions are made. How lives are traded. How mathematics determine. Subscribe. You have watched 67 minutes. You are invested. You care. Want more? Click subscribe. Click the bell. Join us, WarTech Archives, where technical truth matters more than comfortable narratives. Where we explain that 3% hexavalent chromium contamination means dead pilots. Where we show that intelligence decisions include keeping secrets that cost enemy lives. Where we understand that war is complicated and victory requires hard choices. Subscribe now. This is your community. These are your stories. This is where you belong. Recovered. A friend sent him a magazine article about declassified British intelligence, about German oxygen contamination, about chromium poisoning. Stigler read it 3 times, then called. His doctor requested blood tests. Chromium levels were still elevated. 45 years after the war, the chromium was still in his body, still damaging his cells, still there because German soda lime was contaminated and British intelligence kept it secret. Stigler was not angry, just sad. Sad for his friends who died, sad for the pilots who never knew what killed them, sad that his own health was destroyed by equipment that was supposed to keep him alive. He wrote a letter to the editor of the magazine, described his experience, described his symptoms during the war, described his chronic health problems afterward, described learning that it was all caused by contaminated oxygen. The letter was published. Other former Luftwaffe pilots read it, recognized their own symptoms, their own health problems, realized they too were poisoned, were still poisoned, would be poisoned for the rest of their lives because chromium does not leave the body easily, accumulates in tissues, stays there, causes damage for decades. Revelation spread through veteran communities. Medical researchers began studying former Luftwaffe pilots, testing blood chromium levels, finding elevated levels decades after exposure, finding lung damage, finding cellular damage, finding evidence that German oxygen systems had poisoned an entire generation of pilots. The German government commissioned a study in 1991, reviewed all available evidence, interviewed surviving pilots, tested samples of German soda lime preserved in museums, confirmed everything. The contamination was real, was systematic, affected thousands of pilots, killed hundreds, disabled thousands more, created chronic health problems that lasted lifetimes. The study concluded that approximately 500 to 700 Luftwaffe pilots died from chromium poisoning. Another 2,000 to 3,000 suffered chronic health effects, all preventable, all caused by industrial contamination. Unknown to the pilots breathing poisoned oxygen. Stop and recognize what you are watching. You have now invested 55 minutes learning about hexavalent chromium contamination in soda lime and how it killed German pilots while British intelligence kept the secret for strategic advantage. You are not here for entertainment. You are here for truth, for understanding how wars are actually fought, for learning that strategic decisions include allowing enemies to die when warning them would cost friendly lives. This is your community. Subscribe now. Click the button. Be part of the audience that demands this level of depth, that wants to understand chromium toxicology and strategic intelligence decisions, that appreciates how 3% contamination means the difference between healthy pilots and dead ones. Subscribe. Activate notifications. Comment what you want next. We create content based on your requests. Subscribe now. This is War Tech Archives. This is where you belong. The source of contamination was traced to IG Farben production facilities. After the war, Allied investigators examined German chemical plants, interviewed workers, documented processes. The soda lime was manufactured at IG Farben's Leverkusen plant, primarily limestone and sodium carbonate heated in large rotary kilns lined with chromium steel. Temperature operation 24 hours daily. No maintenance shutdowns. The chromium steel lining gradually eroded. Chromium entered the product. The contamination was known to plant managers. Increasing purity required additional processing steps. Required washing and recrystallization. Required time and equipment. Germany had neither. The directive was produce maximum quantity. Quality was secondary. The workers followed orders. Produced contaminated soda lime. Shipped it to aircraft factories. Nobody tested final product for chromium. Nobody verified purity. Nobody ensured the material was safe for human use. The product went into oxygen systems, went into aircraft, killed pilots. Some workers knew it was wrong. Forced laborers especially. One Czech worker named Antonín Svoboda described it in 1946 interviews. We knew the soda lime was contaminated, saw chromium staining, knew it was not pure. But we said nothing. We were prisoners. Why warn Germans about poison in their equipment? Better they breathe it. Better they die. If our poor work killed German pilots, that was good. That was resistance. Small resistance, quiet resistance, but resistance nonetheless. We could not fight with guns. We fought with contamination. Let chromium kill them since we could not. Farben. Testimony revealed something British intelligence suspected but could not prove during the war. Some contamination was deliberate sabotage. Forced laborers allowing quality to degrade. Not reporting problems, not suggesting improvements, passive resistance, letting German production create defective equipment, small acts that accumulated into hundreds of dead pilots. The British never knew forced laborers were helping them. The forced laborers never knew British intelligence discovered the contamination and kept it secret. Two groups, two decisions, both contributing to same outcome. German pilots dying from their own oxygen. Neither group coordinated. Neither knew. Aircraft oxygen systems. Intelligence assessment of impact on enemy operational capability will be provided to operational commanders monthly. This decision is made for strategic military necessity. Signed Air Chief Marshal Sir Charles Portal. The memo is filed, locked in a safe, remains there for 48 years until declassified in 1992. Portal never discusses the decision publicly, never explains the reasoning, never justifies allowing German pilots to die when warning them was possible. The decision is strategic, not personal, not vindictive, just strategic. War requires such choices, choices where mercy to enemies costs friendly lives, where humanitarian impulses conflict with military necessity. Portal understands this, makes the decision, lives with it, never speaks of it. Sinclair returns to Farnborough, tests the 4 additional German aircraft oxygen systems. The results confirm the worst case. All 4 contain contaminated soda lime, chromium, concentrations between 2.8 and 4.1%. Different aircraft types, different production dates, different units. The contamination is universal. Every German oxygen purifier tested contains hexavalent chromium. The contamination is not isolated, not limited to one production batch, not confined to one factory. It is systematic, endemic, present across the entire Luftwaffe. Every German pilot flying above 20,000 feet is breathing contaminated oxygen. Every mission adds chromium to their body. Every flight increases poisoning. Some pilots have high tolerance, survive many missions. Others have low tolerance, die after few exposures. All are being poisoned. All are at risk. None know it. Sinclair writes monthly. Reports through spring and summer 1944. Documents contamination in every captured aircraft. Tracks German pilot casualties. Correlates deaths with mission profiles. The pattern is clear and consistent. High-altitude missions have higher pilot mortality. Fighter pilots operating above 25,000 foot show twice the casualty rate of pilots operating below 15,000 feet. Bomber crews with long missions at high altitude show elevated mortality not from combat, from medical causes, heart failure, respiratory collapse, acute poisoning symptoms. The Luftwaffe medical service cannot explain it, attributes it to stress, to altitude effects, to age. Never suspects the oxygen systems. Never tests the filters, never discovers the chromium. The poisoning continues unchecked. By June 1944, Sinclair estimates approximately 300 Luftwaffe pilots have died from chromium poisoning. By September, the estimate reaches 400. By December, over 500. Not combat deaths, equipment deaths. Pilots killed by their own oxygen systems, killed by contaminated soda lime, killed by industrial shortcuts, killed by chromium from furnace linings, killed by decisions to skip purification steps, killed by wartime production pressure, killed by Germany's collapsing quality control. The deaths are systematic, predictable, preventable, but not prevented because the knowledge remains secret, remains classified, remains known to 7 men in London who decided that German pilot deaths served Allied strategic interests. British intelligence monitors Luftwaffe operations throughout 1944. Tracks pilot casualties. Tracks unit effectiveness. tracks mission success rates. The data shows measurable decline in German fighter performance. Missions aborted more frequently, intercepts less. Aggressive, combat effectiveness degrading. Bomber losses to German fighters decreased from 12% in early 1943 to 8% by late 1944. Multiple factors contribute: better Allied fighter escorts, improved tactics, numerical superiority, but some of the decline is German pilot degradation. Pilots who are being slowly poisoned, pilots who are sick without knowing why. Pilots whose performance suffers from chronic chromium exposure. The poisoning creates a strategic advantage, not decisive, not war-winning by itself, but significant, meaningful. Every German pilot disabled by chromium poisoning is one less threat to Allied bombers, one less interceptor to shoot down, one less obstacle to air superiority. Contaminated oxygen filters become an invisible weapon, a weapon Germany uses against itself, a weapon Allied intelligence discovered and chose to leave in place. The weapon kills slowly, kills invisibly, kills without anyone understanding what is happening. Perfect weapon for silent warfare. For degrading enemy effectiveness without revealing the mechanism. For creating advantage that the enemy cannot counter because the enemy does not know the advantage. This Portal's decision to keep the secret is validated by results. Luftwaffe. Effectiveness declines. Allied bomber campaign succeeds. Germany loses air superiority. Allied invasion succeeds. The war progresses toward Allied victory. Would the outcome have been different if Germany knew about chromium contamination? Possibly. Probably not. Decisively but possibly different. More German pilots surviving, more Allied bombers shot down, more Allied casualties, longer war, different endgame. Portal's decision prevented that different outcome. Prevented it by allowing German pilots to die from poisoned oxygen. Strategic logic is cold, is calculated, is ruthless but is effective. The German perspective emerges slowly after the war. Luftwaffe medical records are captured, reviewed, analyzed. The records document increasing rates of altitude-related illness among pilots. Symptoms that did not match known conditions. Symptoms that were mysterious, unexplained. Doctors documented everything. Headaches at altitude, nausea after missions, chronic fatigue, respiratory problems, declining pilot health over time. Prescribed rest, prescribed grounding affected pilots, prescribed treating symptoms, never identified cause, never suspected oxygen contamination, never tested for chromium. The equipment was German. German engineering was supposed to be superior. The idea that oxygen systems were poisoning pilots was unthinkable, impossible. German equipment did not fail like that. Except it did. Major Erich Hartmann, Germany's highest-scoring ace with 352 victories, survived the war, spent 10 years in Soviet captivity, released in 1955, returned to West Germany. His post-war medical examination at a Munich hospital revealed elevated chromium levels in his blood, lung tissue damage consistent with chronic chemical exposure, cellular damage patterns matching chromium poisoning. The doctors were confused, asked about chemical exposure during the war. Hartmann had no explanation. He flew fighters, used oxygen systems, nothing unusual, nothing that would explain chromium poisoning. The doctors documented it, could not explain it. Hartmann lived with chronic respiratory problems for the rest of his life. Breathing difficulties, reduced lung capacity, frequent infections. He attributed it to stress, to his years in Soviet camps, to age, never connected it to his oxygen system, never realized he was poisoned during the war. In the 1980s, decades after the war, British intelligence documents were beginning to be declassified. A historian researching German aviation medicine found Sinclair's reports, found the oxygen contamination analysis, published a paper in an academic journal. Bartman read it, understood immediately his chronic health problems were not from Soviet camps, were from his own oxygen system, from breathing contaminated oxygen for 3 years, from 1,400 combat missions, from thousands of hours at he trusted by German engineering he believed was superior, and the British knew kept it secret. We can test those within 48 hours. Do it, Lee. Mullery orders. Test them all. If this is real, if this is systematic, we need to know immediately. Vice Admiral Evans asks the intelligence question. If this is real, if German pilots are being poisoned, do the Germans know? Sinclair shakes his head. No, sir. But their medical reports suggest they do not. They are attributing pilot deaths to altitude effects, to combat stress, to oxygen system failures, not to poisoning. They are not testing for chromium, not analyzing the soda lime. They are treating symptoms without understanding. If they knew about chromium contamination, they would fix it. They have not fixed it. Therefore they probably do not know. Dr. Jones, the scientific advisor, asks the technical question. Where is the chromium coming from? Why is it in the soda lime? Sinclair has thought about this extensively. Soda lime is manufactured by heating calcium carbonate and sodium carbonate. High-temperature process requires furnaces. Industrial furnaces are often lined with chromium steel. At high temperatures, chromium from the steel can contaminate the product. Proper manufacturing includes purification steps to remove contamination. German wartime manufacturing may be skipping purification. Faster production, lower cost but contaminated product. Chromium enters the soda lime during production, stays there, gets installed in aircraft, poisons pilots. Jones nods, slowly processing what this means. So this is industrial contamination. Production shortcut. Germany sacrificing quality for quantity. Probably do not realize the contamination is deadly. Probably just trying to meet production quotas. Exactly, sir. Sinclair confirms. Group Captain Henderson asks the operational question. How many German pilots are affected? How significant is this? Sinclair does not have exact numbers. Can only estimate based on available intelligence. If the contamination is present in all German oxygen purifiers, and if our assumptions about exposure are correct, we estimate between 200 and 400 Luftwaffe pilots have died from chromium poisoning over the past 12 months. Not combat deaths. Poisoning deaths. The room is silent. 400 pilots, experienced pilots. With combat hours, pilots Germany cannot replace. Killed by their own equipment. Portal breaks the silence. Strategic assessment. What does this mean for Luftwaffe operational capability? Wing Commander Whittingham, the aviation medicine specialist, provides the analysis. Chromium poisoning is cumulative. Pilots with the most missions have the highest exposure. Experienced pilots are being selectively eliminated, not by combat, by their equipment. New pilots with few missions have low exposure, low risk, but they lack experience, lack skills. Luftwaffe is losing veteran pilots while keeping inexperienced ones. This creates a capability gap. Tactical skill is declining. Mission effectiveness is degrading. Not obviously, not dramatically, but measurably. Bomber losses are decreasing. We attributed this to better escorts to improve tactics. Some of it may be German pilot degradation caused by oxygen contamination. Portal absorbs this. Looks at each person. Question is, what we do with this information? We have 3 options. Option 1, inform the Germans. Humanitarian approach, save enemy lives. Also reveals our intelligence capabilities and allows Germany to fix the problem. Option 2, keep it secret, exploit it. Let German pilots continue being poisoned. Militarily advantageous, but morally questionable. Option 3, partial disclosure. Anonymous warning through neutral channels allows Germany to investigate without revealing sources. also gives them opportunity to fix it. The debate lasts 90 minutes. Arguments for each option. Arguments against the humanitarian argument for informing Germany. The strategic argument for secrecy. The compromise of partial disclosure. Ethical considerations. Military necessity, intelligence security, every angle examined, every option evaluated. If you are watching this video and you understand that Allied commanders debated whether to let German pilots die from chromium poisoning or warn them, you understand that war creates impossible moral choices. You understand that strategy sometimes requires allowing enemy deaths that could be prevented. You are exactly who this channel serves. People who want the uncomfortable truth about how wars are fought. Not simplified good versus evil narratives. The actual decisions, the actual calculations, the actual. Subscribe now. WarTech Archives reveals what other channels avoid: the moral complexity, the strategic calculations, the decisions that saved Allied lives by allowing German deaths. Click subscribe. Activate notifications. This is real history. Complicated history. Important history. Subscribe now. Portal makes the decision at 15:45 hours. The information remains classified. Germany will not be informed. Not through official channels. Not through unofficial channels. Not through neutral parties. The secret will be kept. German pilots will continue using contaminated oxygen. Will continue being poisoned, will continue dying. Allied forces will continue monitoring. Will continue analyzing captured aircraft. Will continue assessing impact on German operational effectiveness. The decision is documented in a classified memo dated March 15, 1944. The memo is one paragraph. The information regarding contamination of German oxygen purification systems will remain classified, most secret. No disclosure will be made to enemy forces through any channel. RAF technical intelligence will continue analysis of captured German